Welcome, welcome everyone as you're filtering your way in. On behalf of the council, the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, this is the Self-Advocate discussion series. Excuse me, I am Chris Hendricks, the Policy Education Coordinator for the council. Thank you so much for being here. This discussion series is a place for North Carolina self-advocates to gather and engage with each other to talk about things that affect our lives as people experiencing life with intellectual and developmental disabilities and other disabilities. And we want this time together used to get to know each other and to get to know the council, where I and other individuals with IDD are leaders, colleagues, and we're valued for our input because we are who we are. This is the nothing about us without us initiative for sure. People with disabilities should always be valued like that, and this discussion series will demonstrate why and how. This month, we're talking about living, setting choices, and housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. How often do we stop and think about how important having a place to live really is? Housing for persons with disabilities is such an important issue, and yet why is it so complicated? We'll do a deep dive into these questions and more with today's guest speakers, of which there are many. But before I open today's discussion, I'd like to get things started as we often do with a little bit of humor. So here are our jokes of the day. This is dad level humor, guys, so you're gonna have to just bear with us. Did you hear about the monster who ate his own house? He was homesick. What's one way we know the ocean is friendly? Any guesses? It waves, of course. Okay, I had to do it. I can't do it as good as our colleague Philip Woodward, but I do the best that I can. We'll jump right into things with a closer look at housing for the IDD community. So, when we think of living choices for persons with disabilities, we need to ask, is it safe? Is it accessible? Is it affordable? So let's take a moment to break down what each of these things mean under the law. Safe housing means housing that does not jeopardize the health, safety, or welfare of its occupants, and that permits access to electricity, heat, and running water for the benefit of its occupants. Accessible housing means housing that people with disabilities can easily enter and use. Accessible housing has features people may need to live independently, like wider doorways, clear floor space for wheelchairs to move throughout the home, or low countertops, assistive technology, and grab bars in the bathroom, and more. Affordable housing means housing that a household can pay for while still having money left over for other necessities like food, transportation, and healthcare. That means that what's considered affordable depends on a household's income. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, considered housing to be affordable when a household spends 30% or less of its income on housing costs. These are important concerns for anyone living in a place to call home or looking for a place to call home. But housing can be complicated when it comes to people with disabilities. Close proximity to job sites, grocery stores, and healthcare facilities are not just conveniences. They are necessities for decent living. People with IDD have a profound ability to adapt. We know that. However, home is meant to be a place of sanctuary, not struggle. We do that enough. In other words, your home should adapt to you, not the other way around. We all need to feel connected to our community, but for persons with IDD, community connection can be the difference between sickness and health. Despite these very clear necessities, we have a long way to go when it comes to living space for people with IDD. Here are just a few statistics to consider that either directly or indirectly are related to housing for people with disabilities.
Chris, this is Melissa. If you could slow down just a beat.
You got it. Must be the caffeine, Melissa. I apologize, everybody. All right, Melissa, may I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. In a nationwide survey in 2017, 62% of people with disabilities dreamed of living in their own homes. More than 25% of caregivers who support family members with IDD are over the age of 60. 76% of persons with IDD live with family, and it's believed that 5% of housing, 5%, is accessible for people with moderate intellectual and developmental disabilities, and a staggering 1% of housing is accessible for wheelchair users. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2022 reported that the employment rate for people with disabilities is 17%, while persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities is closer to 8%. We've included an employment statistic because homes are expensive. Land, materials, and labor add up. As of October 2022, the median price for a home in North Carolina was $345,000. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina around that time was $1,305. It's a lot of money. And this is really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the housing crisis for people with disabilities. And it is indeed a crisis. The good news is we are very resilient. Every self-advocate here knows what it takes to adapt in the face of adversity. The other good news is we have several knowledgeable speakers today who will shed some light on the subject. And with that, I would like to introduce our first guest presenter, Emila Sutton. Did I say your name right this time?
You did. Thank you, Chris.
Yes. Excellent. Emila has more than 17 years of experience in homelessness and affordable housing, including direct service, state and federal housing, and homelessness policy and funding, and program design and implementation. Ms. Sutton works with continuums of care, states, and communities to create affordable housing. We've invited Emila today because of her experience with North Carolina Housing Finance Agency, and the NC Homestead Plan. Welcome, Emila. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate all of those statistics you shared. I think that really helped to provide a backdrop for the incredible challenges that are occurring in finding affordable housing. Go ahead. Did you want to?
Yeah, I was just, I mean, you're in it. I was based on your history and your role currently, tell us what we need to know as self-advocates with IDD about safe and affordable and accessible housing.
Yeah, thanks. So I think because there's such a limitation of safe and affordable and accessible housing, you really have to dig deep and utilize every tool in the toolbox available to you. I know as a person with a disability, I would not be able to be stable and have good health without my safe and affordable housing. And so, as you said, it is incredibly key. I think there are tools that are perhaps not utilized that often. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other speakers and hearing about all of the resources they know about and can share with this group. But I will kind of say that a piece of this is utilizing reasonable accommodation and the Fair Housing Act. So because there is such limited availability to accessible housing and affordable housing, really need to figure out how to access housing. And one of the avenues for a lot of people with disabilities is utilizing the Fair Housing Act and reasonable accommodation, which is allowed under that. So I'll just mention that, and I'm going to put in the chat a guide to reasonable accommodation. But fair housing law prevents discrimination because of the disability of the renter or a household member or anyone associated with the renter. And it allows for accommodations to be made for that person. And that can be numerous different ways. So that can be at application time if someone doesn't have the proper credit history, or if they have a negative credit history that's related to their disability. You can ask for accommodations in order to overcome that and then be accepted. While at Housing Finance Agency, we did an analysis of targeted units, which are Department of Health and Human Services an HFA coordinated program that provides set-aside units in tax credit properties for people with disabilities, and found that most people did not request reasonable accommodation, but those who did, 40% were then who were denied access to a unit because they applied for reasonable accommodation were then allowed access into the unit. So it's a really powerful tool. And again, I'll put a resource into the chat. The other thing I would just say quickly is that you know, to advocate at the local level, we know that there are very few resources, but public housing agencies at the local level sometimes will have preferences for people with disabilities. Vouchers are incredibly difficult to come by, but there are wait lists that are open at times, and there are housing choice voucher programs that are underutilized. And so I do recommend advocating, if there is not a preference for someone with a disability at your local public housing agency, to advocate for there to be. They publish administrative plans every year, and these administrative plans go up for public comment. And you can go to your public housing agency website and usually find this administrative plan, which are legally required to be posted publicly. If it's not available on the website, they do need to supply it in some other way. So you can call and ask to see whether there is a preference. And then you can participate in this public comment period and ask for a preference to be set. If the housing choice voucher is underutilized, that program, you know, suggesting that there be a limited preference category, for example, where, you know, a PHA can open their waitlist, for example, to just a certain specific preference population, which could be a person with a disability. Now, they do have to receive a waiver from HUD in order to serve disability-specific populations, but they can request that waiver, and you can request them to request that waiver. So I would just wrap up by saying, you know, utilize all the tools in your toolbox, one of which should always be reasonable accommodation, and then also advocating with your local public housing agency. And I'm happy to answer any questions and come back in at a later time.
Emila, thank you so much. What I'm hearing you say, and you know, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, there was so much valuable information that you shared, so many tools, but with certain actions taken, including general advocacy, but specifically reasonable accommodation, there absolutely is a place for the IDD community when it comes to housing and living choices. And that sounded very, very positive to me. Is that fair to say?
It is, Chris.
Thank you so much for your time today, Emila. We'll definitely be coming back to you, but you shared so much valuable information. We appreciate you. Next, I would like to introduce our next presenter, Stacy Carlson. Stacy has been a part of housing and the disability community for 15 years in various capacities, and she is currently the Housing Stabilization Coordinator for the Division of Aging and Adult Services with DHHS, or the Department of Health and Human Services. Welcome, Stacy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us about your experience in housing. I know it's tough to take 15 years and shrink it down, but and how it relates to persons with disabilities as you're able.
Yeah, so I've held various positions where I've managed housing programs and assisted people with disabilities and older adults. So some of that has been focused on affordable housing and housing for people with lower incomes. I've also been involved in programs that assist with home repair and home modifications, which is also really necessary to maintaining safe housing as well. So, I mean, overall, DHHS does a lot to offer housing support and programs that are affordable, accessible, and integrated into the community. So in my current position, I work with the targeting program with which Emila had mentioned, which has a partnership with the Housing Finance Agency. This is a disability neutral program for lower income people with disabilities who need access to supportive services so they can live independently in the community. So we also work to support the state goals of the Transition to Community Living Initiative to offer those individuals with mental health disabilities opportunities to live in the community so they can be integrated into community and have affordable housing at the same time.
That feeds perfectly into my next question. So clearly you had a variety of experiences over the last 15 years that definitely relate to persons with IDD. How is it that focusing on housing and places to live for people with disabilities benefit the community as a whole?
I really believe our communities are stronger when we recognize the unique gifts that each person brings. So those diverse life experiences and abilities really help us to build stronger communities and make thoughtful decisions, encourage that collaboration and creative problem solving, which is really so necessary when we're talking about an affordable housing crisis and creating solutions for that. It's important that people with disabilities are representative and they have a voice in these discussions around our community planning and growth so we can create inclusive communities. I could say more about people with disabilities. You know, it's a group that I feel very passionate about. I think there's numerous benefits that are provided to our community, our workforce, all of our connections, social roles within our neighborhoods, within our families, within our local communities. So it's important that they have a place and that they're included.
Well, what I'm hearing you say, Stacy, is that our community is an important part of the chain, and if we're missing, then the chain doesn't work. Is that fair to say?
Yes, exactly right.
Well, what can you tell us about home buying and ownership versus the type of housing for other types of housing for persons with disabilities? Is it something that's a possibility? And if it's not, are there other possibilities? What are your thoughts?
There are a lot of possibilities out there, and you know, each person is unique. I think that's why it's important to look at this from a person-centered perspective and create a plan which really sets an individual up for success according to the goals they have for themselves, the resources they have around them, and what they're looking for in housing, their own personal, you know, requirements. So when I've had discussions with people about this, you know, it's important to consider what income do they have, or what programs are they involved in? Are they aware of all the state or other programs they might be eligible for that could help them get into the housing that they desire? Also looking at community support, that's really important with family, friends, community, other connections. I've talked to so many people who are maybe going through a difficult time, and I ask them, do they have any supports? And frequently the answer is no. So when you're looking at housing, seeing are there possibilities to create a community surrounding you? So we all need that community to have those supports in place. And then those specific things like what's required in housing for that makes sense for you, that makes sense for me. You know, looking at location to services, medical care, employment, transportation, of course, making sure it's safe, accessible, affordable. Emila discussed reasonable accommodations, and part of that could be modifications, any physical changes required to a property. Now, that can happen in rental property. It can obviously, if you own a home, then you have more choices and options about what you want to do. Majority of rental places will allow for modifications and may be required to approve those modifications, but it's really important to have those goals in front of you when you're looking, especially at rental housing, and share that with landlords and property management companies right up front. So you can make sure that they're going to support any modification or accommodation needs that you may have in a property.
Well, I really appreciate that information, and I know that Emila touched on this a little bit, but from your perspective, what are some more actions or any other actions that we can take to advocate for better housing and living choices in the community? And if some of this information is repeated, that just means that it needs to be repeated because it's so valuable. So don't worry.
Yeah, of course. I'd really recommend developing an awareness of housing policy. And for those who aren't already aware, the North Carolina Housing Coalition is a wonderful organization that provides advocacy efforts for affordable housing. So you can always engage with them and learn more about what they do and help them with their efforts. And then on a local level, city and county planning boards, design how the communities are going to be created for the future, for housing, for transportation. They frequently are required to have public meetings or make things known to the public before things are finalized. So if you can find out about what they're doing in your local planning board, make sure that those plans include people with disabilities and that they're included as part of the design for your future community. There's also local housing departments. So finding out what programs are out there, they could have other options, other financial resources available in the local community. And many of them will have strategic plans and also future goals for their department. So also being a part of that and making sure that part of their plan is including people with disabilities.
So clearly that's a lot, and it's all valuable, but that's one of the reasons why housing is complicated but doable. And I think you've already somewhat answered this question. It sounds like there's hope to me, or more to look forward to when it comes to housing options for persons with disabilities in the future. Do you agree with that? And is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I think the future is very bright. And there's one project I had been following in Chatham County. There's a project called the Farm at Penny Lane. This was constructed for people with mental health disabilities. It was built through a public-private partnership between Cross Disability Services and the UNC School of Social Work. So I always get very encouraged when I see creative ideas like this that are successful, meeting the needs of the people that live there. And so that gives me hope that, you know, this could be replicated in other areas. There could be other partners that collaborate. So I always encourage, you know, finding those creative projects that have been successful, then talking to those people who made that happen and seeing, I wonder if we could, you know, have this in our community as well.
The last little bit cut out for me, but it sounds like that there's opportunities in pockets of North Carolina if we are able to take the time to actually look for these various programs and calls to action that people are already taking, including, you know, things like tiny homes and others. So I appreciate you helping us look outside the box, Stacy.
You're welcome, Chris.
Insights have been really helpful today. We appreciate you. Well, with that, I would love to bring our self-advocate speaker to the stage, Miss Deja Barber, who is going to be accompanied by Laura Wells. We got presenters these presenters are going to speak examples of best and promising practices in housing options and home ownership. Deja Barber and Laura Wells are from Hope, North Carolina. Deja Barber is the Self-Advocate Coordinator for Hope NC, and Laura Wells is the Executive Director of Hope. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Deja, I know you, but not everyone knows you. Can you tell us about yourself and Hope, North Carolina? How does this organization impact housing for people with disabilities?
Alrighty, so a little bit about me. As Hope said, as Chris said, I'm Deja Barber. I'm the Self-Advocate Coordinator for Hope. Hope actually was an organization started by 3 mothers whose sons all had IDD, and they're basically the challenge of when their children became adults. Basically, what would they do to care for them? Where would they go after they aged and got too old to take care of them? And also, but keeping them engaged in the community. So the whole idea kind of around Hope is that we plan to build a community that offers social supports and independent living and social engagement. Because as y'all know, there's not much housing around North Carolina for our community other than the group home. As I can see from the chat, many of y'all said there's not much housing. That's why Hope's aim is to build a housing development where 1/4 of the units are for adults with disabilities, 1/4 are for older adults, so those are our aging parents, and then the rest are for individuals or families that honestly can't afford the price of housing in our area. Basically, we want to connect them to live on their own, but if they can't live on their own and need a roommate, that also is a possibility. So that's the overall theme of hope as a whole community, basically. So that's a little bit about hope for that question.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, the elements of the community that are important are it's an accessible location near transit, that we can build common areas both inside and outside for people to gather socially, that we will have on-site staff that will be available, and that their responsibility will be to assist all the residents that live there with being connected to resources that they need, and also providing programming for the social engagement piece, so that neighbors get to know each other and those natural supports are created. And then smart technology being provided in units that also can help with living independently. And I like to say living interdependent. Of us really live independently. We all have family members or friends or supports in our lives that enable us to live healthy and happy. So it's really interdependently. And then one way we're trying to impact housing for people with disabilities is through we have a grant for collective impact work. And all collective impact means is bringing people together from different agencies, different organizations, and area of expertise, as well as, or very importantly, alongside people with lived experience or people with disabilities, to really decide how to fine-tune the options that we're building and creating, and how to solve for the common problems that make this type of inclusive housing really hard to develop in North Carolina. So I wanted to just say we need people like the folks attending this call, primarily self-advocates, to help us with this work. And Deja, we're so lucky to have her coordinating the self-advocates who are involved in the work. So I'll put a link in the chat if you're interested in joining the work. We'd love to have you.
Laura, I love all that you said, particularly around interdependence. What is it about helping people like us benefits the community as a whole in your opinion, Deja and Laura?
Okay, I can do that. Basically, the benefits basically include, as I said, Hope wants us to be inside the community. So basically, your neighbors are your friends. So basically, as Laura said, everybody's going to be supporting each other and we're going to be learning from each other. So basically, meaning we're going to be an intentional community. So it's going to be a diverse community, as you can see by the layout of what we want. But the whole point is intentional. So we're learning together, living together, and feeling a purpose in the community. So we know that people feel lonely and isolated, but the Hope model will not just benefit people with disabilities, but everyone. That's kind of our main focus, is benefiting everyone and helping everyone see if we all can live together as one, we can probably have a better community as one as well. So, and also this also points also by creating accessible housing, people can live together and age together in one place. So like there's no need to like feeling like you're gonna age in separate locations. We can age together in one location as one.
I couldn't have put it better than myself. Go ahead, Laura. Go ahead.
Just one quick point I will add is that I often say that if we're lucky enough to live long enough, everybody will suffer some kind of disability, whether temporary or permanent. And so when you create communities like this, connected communities, inclusive communities, it, like Deja said, it really does benefit everyone. Even if it doesn't seem like it might benefit you now, it certainly will at some point in your life.
Laura, I always say this to family and friends with the perfect combination of truth and love, which is I represent a piece of your future, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you put it in a really, really powerful way. What can you all tell us about home buying versus renting or other types of housing for people with disabilities? Deja?
Basically, what we can tell you guys right now is our housing options are very limited, as y'all said in the chat. There's vouchers for rental accessible housing through the public housing authorities, which will be through your county, or accessible housing through Section 8. We all know those are very limited and long wait lists right now. And also the location limited the housing I can speak to from experience aren't the best locations. So we know those are also limited options. There are people with Medicaid waiver, there's supported living and supports that can assist you while living in your home, apartment, or the waiver can also pay for you living in a group home, which, as we said earlier, that is not so focused for our community. It will not be a group home focus, but that waiver can pay if you choose to want to live in a group home currently. Um, Home ownership right now is challenging for everyone, but especially for the IDD population due to the high cost of housing. There are some houses available through Habitat or the Community Home Trust, which is in Orange County, that are lower cost to purchase, but you still have to apply to get this house to apply to get that housing through those programs. So they are very limited options right now because of the state of our housing crisis. But there are options if you are able to use those options. Please look into those programs.
Well, and if we want to know more in the future, y'all have a housing summit coming up, don't you? Or not?
Yes, we
I mean, in a
do.
couple months. When is it?
November 13th. Well, I'm
November.
correct on that, right?
Yes,
November 13th.
that's it. November 13th, Monday. It's a Monday.
And I will we'll put that in the I will add that to the resources portion of our PowerPoint, and I'll also put it send it out as a reminder along with the resources email for everyone attending today's discussion. So we really appreciate y'all for all this really valuable information.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Deja. Next, I'm going to introduce Alex and Danielle. We are no shortage of speakers today, but we're moving right along. So as Melissa shared earlier, if I'm going a little too fast, it's just because I'm really hyped up about this topic. So feel free to tell me to slow down. Hopefully my pace is okay. But I want to introduce a dear friend of mine, or dear friends of mine now. I feel like we're friends. Hopefully I can say that about you, Danielle.
Absolutely.
We have Alex Nickodem and Danielle Berman. Alex is a real estate agent who helps people with a variety of needs in the Triangle. He's been a fundraiser for Habitat for Humanity, and he works with people like Danielle from Community Home Trust, as Deja mentioned them towards the end of their portion of the presentation, to provide extra support for people in need when buying a home and navigating the real estate market. Thank you so much for both of you joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here, Chris.
We'll start with Danielle. Danielle, can you tell us about your experience in housing and your organization and how it relates to our needs?
Absolutely, yeah. My name's Danielle. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at Community Home Trust, and we are a nonprofit affordable housing organization in Orange County, whose mission is to provide permanently affordable housing opportunities to diverse populations in partnership with our communities. Those are primarily home ownership opportunities, as you've heard. And I'll just briefly tell you about our sort of unique slice of the affordable housing world by telling you two kind of essential components of our work. The first is that we're a land trust, which means that we do a lot more than just buy and sell or rent homes. We're really invested in our community and are part of the community. And so we're committed to the long-term success of our residents as homeowners. We provide supports for our homeowners through first-time homebuyer education, one-on-one financial counseling, access to resources for home maintenance and homeowner education, and lots of personal one-to-one access to professionals who walk our homebuyers through the entire process, from application to closing to all the things that will come up as a homeowner, and then also through the resale process when you move out of your home. So we have full-time realtors and home inspectors on our staff, and our services wrap around all parts of the process and allow us to partner with our homeowners to really get to know them and their needs. The second really essential part is that we're the town of Chapel Hill's inclusionary zoning partner, which means that our homes are fully integrated into the community. In a super short, quick summary, what that means is that anytime a developer builds new homes in Chapel Hill, they're required to provide a percentage of those homes as permanently affordable, and those become part of the Community Home Trust inventory. What's important about that is that it means that our homes are just like all the other homes in a given neighborhood, fully part of the neighborhood, like all the other homes the developer builds. And it also means that we can sometimes work with the developers to make sure they are building the homes that our home buyers need. As an example, I'll share a super quick story about one of our homeowners named Kate. Kate came to North Carolina to attend the UNC School of Social Work. And when she graduated, she stayed. She's now a social worker in the pediatric oncology unit at UNC hospitals. Because Kate has cerebral palsy, she had a really hard time finding accessible, affordable housing, both when she was a student and after she had graduated, once she was here working at UNC. She happened to find Community Home Trust when we were in the process of developing some new condos in downtown Chapel Hill. And she was actually able to help us work with the developer to design a condo that was accessible for her. So she was able to talk with us about needing different counter heights, needing, wider doorways, that sort of thing. And so her condo, because the timing worked out great with the developer, we're able to make that really accessible. And that was really important to Kate, to being able to be here and work in our community. I'm going to actually drop a link in the chat to Kate's story if you want to read more about her, but I'll stop there. I could go on and on, but I'll stop there for now, Chris.
Hey, it's a big topic. I totally understand. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's an important story because it gives people on this call and others beyond hope for the possibility of finding the right spot for themselves. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Sure.
And now I'd like to ask Alex, if you could share your thoughts on home buying ownership versus other types of housing for persons with disabilities, just your general thoughts as a realtor and someone who's just a good human being dedicated to helping anyone find the right space for them, regardless of ability.
Well, thanks, Chris. Can you hear me, by the way?
I can.
That's a small miracle. Cell phone reception, not great with the towers down or what's happening with the storm. Whatever one situation, having disability or not, stable income is extremely important. While rent does not build equity, equity being more homeownership in your home and the primary driver of household wealth. Rent does not have the fluctuation in expenses that come with homeownership. So yeah, there's a lot there with homeownership. And 1 year, no major expenses could pop up, and another year's several could. Homeownership is a great thing and a great fit for many, but no matter what one's life circumstances, stable income has to be there. And when I say stable, I don't necessarily mean a high income, I mean consistent. And I can also say that homeownership is extremely rewarding. I mean, rent can be rewarding in ways too, but homeownership can be great. And I'm not just talking about finances. Financially, homeownership might not be a great choice for someone. Talking to financial professionals is something I highly recommend before you making a decision to pursue homeownership. And I'm happy to connect people with resources in those sectors.
That's, Alex, I really appreciate a lot of the things that you said there. And one of the key things that I took away was that it's not necessarily, while having a high income is nice, I love that you said, I didn't say high, I said stable.
Yeah,
and consistent rather. Sorry.
Helped 10 first-time home buyers last year. All of them did not have particularly high incomes. Only 2 out of those 10 had family help with buying their homes, but the rest, we all made it happen. I think being proactive and realistic and flexible are more important than the amount of money you have if homeownership's your goal.
Well, that certainly gives me a much better perspective for everything. And I have to say, Alex has guided me in various ways to advocate for homeownership. I'm not there yet, but I'm working towards that with my family, and I am a self-advocate who was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Can you share what are some actions, in your opinion, Alex, that you can take as a self-advocate to come close to our ideal living space?
Yeah, for everyone on this call or people I would say that if you have a real estate agent or someone is, and maybe if you're not necessarily actively trying to buy a home, just ask more of them. don't be shy. Maybe you are just looking for an apartment or to rent a single family home. Maybe you aren't a good candidate for traditional ownership, but you are wondering what the other options are out there. You've heard of Community Home Trust, you've heard of Habitat, you might have heard of CASA, any of these organizations, Section 8. Like, ask these realtors and these people that you know to help you. Even if you think that they're, they might not get paid off of this, or they might get paid a very small amount. That's we have to go above and beyond just working for clients that we think that we can get a standard commission from. So I could go way more into that, but I know time's limited here, so I'll just hold it to that. And I'm always happy to help anyone help navigate that process. And my first client I ever had, I felt was a better fit for the Community Home Trust, and I've referred her to them, and she's been a happy homeowner for 5 years now. And that's not one that I got paid the traditional commission on. I got 1/10 of what I might have gotten if she stayed on the regular market.
Alex, thank you for your openness and your honesty. I love what you said about connecting with other with knowledgeable real estate agents and just consistently asking questions. That's so important. And I just want to say there's been a lot of resources shared today, and we have, excuse me. We do have a resources page that we are going to get to, but anyone who has any links to any resources that we don't go over today, I would just encourage you to put them in the chat, because we are going to be saving the chat, and I am going to be compiling resources for everyone and sending it out just as a reminder. And now that we have gone through all of our presenters and you guys have taken in a lot of information, I would like to return to Emila Sutton for just a moment, because you do have experience with the North Carolina Housing and Finance Agency, and you shared so much at the beginning. We've heard some of the best and promising practices. Would you like to share any thoughts or comments on what we've heard? Because it's a lot to digest, but I have a feeling that you can help focus us in a bit.
Yeah, I'll try, Chris. Thank you. And I really appreciate all of the information that the speaker shared. It's so valuable. And I just want to kind of piggyback on Alex in particular, and just kind of reiterate the importance of really contacting anyone and everyone and utilizing all resources available to you. I think he's exactly right that you really never know what is going to happen, and that, contacting brokers and real estate agents, apartment associations. I'm going to put a couple of resources into chat, NC Housing Search, as well as affordablehousing.com to find those affordable units. I think, what is reflected in chat is what is reality, which is that there are not enough resources to provide enough affordable housing. And I think, we know this. And, I think that the last report that came out from the National Low Income Housing Coalition said that North Carolina has 44 available rental homes for every 100 households with low incomes. So that, that's not great. And then on top of that, you're looking at issues of accessibility for people with disabilities, as well as, access barriers and challenges that are added on top of that. So, I'm not going to sort of sugarcoat that the situation is not great. And I think that's why my best advice is you really have to utilize every single tool that is available to you in order to find housing. There's a very little amount of what is called naturally affordable housing, which is housing that without a subsidy or rent assistance of any kind would be affordable to a household. That is why subsidies are so important. Again, there are not enough subsidies. There are only about, I think, a quarter of people that qualify for rent assistance are actually have access to that rent assistance. The resources are not there, right? And so you really have to go that extra mile in order to find whatever resources are available in your community. Additionally, to advocate for additional resources in your community. Folks in your local areas should hear about the importance of housing, and particularly the importance of housing for people with disabilities. I think there sometimes is a lack of knowledge or understanding about what is needed, but we know that where there is more affordable housing, there is less homelessness and housing instability. And so the simple answer is there needs to be more affordable housing. And so however that can be created or accessed is what needs to happen. I'll put NC Housing Search into chat. And I think, I just want to reiterate too the importance of NCCDD in this work. I put into chat, but I'll just repeat that, Philip and NCCDD were really important parts and advocates in the development process for the North Carolina Health and Human Services Strategic Housing Plan. That is currently at its last stages. It should be published this winter, but they were a key part of making sure that people with disabilities' voices were heard and advocated for. And because of that, there are components of that plan that are directly tied back. And they also have policy priorities that are now going to be reflected in the plan because of their advocacy for that. So organizations like this are just, and people like you and self-advocates and everyone on this call, this is what is going to get us where we need to be to have more access to safe, affordable housing and to the quality services that are needed to help people stabilize in housing.
Emila, thank you so much. I heard so much valuable stuff. Thanks for throwing some gems at the council. And thank you for your honesty. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that we're looking at a mountain, but you're not alone. Okay, one of the reasons why we have this specific discussion and why we have this organization, so we can remember that we're all in this together and we can come together to solve, to eat this elephant one bite at a time, and we will figure out a way. And now it is time to hear from our attendees. This is a self-advocate discussion series. It exists for you, the self-advocates. We want to hear your voice very loud and very clear. If you haven't done so yet, and you're on this call, I invite you to turn on your cameras. We are here to help you. We are here to support you. We are here to encourage you. If you will direct your attention to the screen, you'll see there are some questions today. And we encourage you to share in a way that is comfortable for you. First and foremost, if you have any questions for our speakers, our presenters, that's what they're here for. They want to hear from you, and you can ask those questions either in the chat, or you can raise up your hand in your Zoom screen, or you can unmute yourself, whatever way is best for you. And I'm going to go over the questions really quickly. So if you don't have any questions for our speakers, please share with us what your ideal place is to live, or share why is housing important to the IDD community as a whole, in your opinion. And with that, I will be monitoring.
So Chris, this is Melissa. There are a lot of questions and comments in the chat. And so for those of you who have written questions in the chat, if you're willing to ask your question during this portion of the program, please go forward and go ahead and ask that same question you've put into the chat. Meanwhile, Chris, like you said, you've got hands up and people are asking questions.
My goodness, we do have hands up. Okay, could we start with Marie Dodson is first on my list. What's your question?
Yes, thank you for this. This is the first time I've attended this this webinar, and I was writing everything down, and someone said that they were going to try to send the links that are in the chat, and I also added a link myself. This was published. I'm the steering committee chair for Alliance MCO CFAC. It's a 6-county region, and North Carolina is divided into currently 6 MCOs. So tiny housing and affordable housing is, we cover Mecklenburg County, Durham, the Triangle, most of the Triangle, Orange, Wake, Johnson County, Cumberland County. So we're like in our metro area where it's very difficult to have cheap housing affordable housing and safe housing for our population. So I'm hoping that that y'all will share, because I'm writing down as fast as I can, trying to get all this in there. And my question is, what else can we do in our community? We've reached out to our Board of Commissioners. We've reached out to our developer, asking them to please put aside a little bit of land, so at least put tiny housing in or something. But unfortunately, Johnson County is the fastest growing county in the state, and they can make $350,000, $400,000 off a house. They're not going to put in the little houses. And I saw the hope and all that. How can y'all give me some advice of who else can I talk to try and encourage these developers to put aside a little bit of land so we can build some affordable housing? I know that's a big ask. I know it's a huge ask.
Any speaker want to jump on that?
I can just echo that. That's Marie. That's the biggest challenge. I mean, we at Hope are still searching for land, because the developer piece for us came together with, we have a nonprofit affordable developer who's willing to build it and manage it and, you know, keep it affordable for a lifetime. But that means we can't afford the cost of land in this area, as we all know, which is really expensive. So it seems like you get one or the other. If you get, you know, the expensive developer with the land, you're going to not be able to make it affordable. We've got the affordable developer, but we don't have the piece of land. So I wish I had an answer for you, but if you're interested in kind of developing this type of community, let me know, because we are working on a statewide inclusive housing coalition that we welcome anybody to join.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Laura. And I'm sure we have more input on that, but I just want to shift over to Cynthia Harris. I see you have a hand up as well, Cynthia.
Hi. I love the webinar. It was very nice, but there are no affordable and there are no IDP communities in Durham County. Now, I see Philip has said there was North Street apartment. That's in Raleigh. There's nothing in Durham County. So how can we get more housing choices available in Durham County for the IDP community?
That's a really big question.
Anyone can answer that. I'm a self-advocate, and I am also like peer support specialist, and I do work with a lot of different individuals. And I do have traumatic brain injury, but there are no choices for housing. I'm still waiting to hear back about me getting Section 8 in Durham and in Wake County.
This is Melissa. Deja Barber had a part of her script that we had to cut in the interest of time that had to do with self-advocates doing legislative work and the different activities to reach your legislators to talk about the housing crisis. Deja, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can.
Basically, I know Deja. Hey, Deja.
Basically, kind of what we're kind of hoping is sort of do with Hope is that we're also going to help some self-advocates understand the process of how to talk to legislators, how to really get your story out, how to really be upfront about what we need, and more coming from our eyes. Because I feel like a lot of it's family support's great, but if there's also the person affected can say their point, then that makes it better. So honestly, starting probably in the next few months, we probably at Hope as a Self-AdvocateCoordinator coordinator will start working on possibly doing some workshops and some series based around advocacy writing, really how to get what we need out to certain people like legislative people and those kind of higher ups in the different kind of counties. Because I feel like at this point we've done all we can really with trying to convince people. I think it's the point now. It needs to be more directly stated.
Well, just email me.
So that will be starting soon to help with reaching political and legislative people. to get our stories heard and to say the reasoning of why we need more accessible housing.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
Deja.
Deja.
Email
Thank
me,
you.
please.
And
And
Laura
will-
Wells has also included in the chat that there's a group in Charlotte working on this specifically. They are part of the Inclusive Housing Coalition, and we're starting this month. Well done. Thank you, Laura.
yes, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Deja. I'll just say, as the policy education coordinator for the council, it is one of my jobs is to help gather those stories of self-advocates and empower our legislatures using those stories. So I stand behind you with that. And I want to move it on over to Laura Newell. You had your hand up in the chat whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So we had tried to get housing with a Key Dream grant, but I had sold my other condo a couple of years ago, and so that was a special trust. So that disqualified us, even though it wasn't enough to buy another condo, because the price of housing has gone up a lot since then. And so we were on the wait list for several different housing agencies, and there just isn't enough housing to go around. I would love to talk to some legislators. I'm having a really hard time getting up with them, getting them to respond to emails and that sort of thing. I'm told that I guess they've been on vacation or for the summer, so I guess it depends on if they come back in session in September. I've been trying to get up with county commission people to get them to come to the Self-Advocate group to talk about housing as well. Nobody shows up, nobody calls me or responds to emails. It's very frustrating. Fortunately, my husband got approved for SSDI back in April after like a year and a half of waiting. And then we were finally able to find a place that was affordable, condo, but it was really challenging and we were really getting discouraged trying to find anything in our price range. And we had some help with real estate people, but it just, we finally found something that works for us.
Hey, Laura, this is Chris. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to gear you towards the chat. Alex has shared in the chat. I have a state legislator that will respond and listen. Greg Mayer, and he's happy to do an e-introduction. And I think that the common denominator here, y'all, particularly for self-advocates, is we just got to talk to our legislators. We have just got to recognize that we have the power, that we can come together, that we can gather our stories in a concise way, share our needs, as Deja has so poignantly put, and that we can make a dent in this thing. And I know that there's more work to be done. There are so many questions that were not answered, but I've got to jump over to the resources page and the events and opportunities page. As a reminder, the Hope Second Annual Housing Summit is November 13th. There's an upcoming Lunch and Learn. The event title actually just came out yesterday, so I'll update that, and that's for anyone to join, including self-advocates, and it's virtual. And don't forget about SARTAC, which is the Self-Advocate Resources and Technical Assistance Center. There's a link there. And our next self-advocate discussion series on September 20th is going to tackle the Rossi Fund for any self-advocates that would like to take advantage of those funds to go to conferences and receive training. Included in your PowerPoint is some links to some of those statistics that we've shared. And we are going to save all of those resources, and I'm going to fix one of the links isn't working. I'm going to fix that for you guys. We are right at 2 o'clock. I'm going to throw a softball over to my co-facilitator, Melissa Schwartz. What's the best way to make sure all these questions are tackled to the best of our ability, in your opinion?
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to all of you that are in attendance. We are going to be, if you want to take a few minutes and type additional questions in the chat, we will be taking those questions from the chat and addressing them and putting a response and answer to them. After each session from the Self-Advocate discussion series, Chris creates a resources document that usually has what's on that slide. But for the first time, we're going to go ahead and incorporate some of these questions that didn't get responded to. And if we don't know the answers, we're going to turn to our guest presenters. And if they're not the appropriate people, we're going to find other people in our network to give us the answers to your questions, unless there just aren't any answers. But Chris will probably have that email out in the next 10 to 14 days. So
Absolutely.
we will stick around for those of you who want to add any additional questions into that chat box for us to save. And in reminder, the entire session is recorded. So it takes a lot longer for that to be edited and then available on the via the council's YouTube channel. But we will also send notice that this session is available.
And with that, as we're taking time to add important questions and information to the chat, I want to take the time to thank all of you. I know that this is such a broad topic, and we did our absolute best to incorporate everything that we could into an hour. I want to take a moment to thank all of our speakers. I want to thank Emila Sutton for jumping on. I want to thank Alex and Danielle. I want to thank Deja and Laura and Stacy. I want to thank our ASL interpreters. I want to thank our Spanish interpreters and our captioner and all of the support that we have. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for your bravery in answering questions. We will conquer this mountain together one day if we stand together, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Self-Advocate discussion series on September 20th. Thank you all so much for being with us here today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks to all.
Take care, everybody.
There were some really wonderful comments put in chat, very thoughtful comments in chat.
Yeah, there really is.
I'm going to give it just a couple more minutes. All right, I'm going to